Dogs are man's best friend, but what would we do if we discovered that these beloved domesticated creatures could increase the risk of exposure of disease-inflicting pathogens to wildlife species such as the endangered African wild dog? The paper Contact with Domestic Dogs Increases Pathogen Exposure in Endangered African Wild Dogs from the journal PLOS ONE researches just this issue and subsequently finds some interesting results. A large decline in the number of species, in particular the wild dog or Lucanon pictus, can be accredited to infectious diseases. Population crashes and some extinctions of the wild dog have been accredited to the rabies virus, canine distemper virus, and the bacterial pathogen of auriculosis, which is a tick-borne bacterial infection. Not only do these pathogens infect the wild dog, but they also infect domestic dogs. Knowing this, the authors of this paper hypothesized that domestic dogs transmit disease-causing pathogens to wild dogs. To test this idea, the authors of this paper created a test environment, which included two different land types of community lands and commercial lands. This graph shows the contact between wild dogs and domestic dogs, showing community land produced the highest contact, showing two dogs from the same pack having the highest exposure of approximately 0.139 exposure to domestic dogs. So once they had developed their study areas, the authors of this paper had to test their hypothesis. How did they do this, you may ask? Well, they started by capturing and immobilizing 90 wild dogs from 19 different packs and installing radio collars on the animals' necks. Once done, they withdrew blood from the jugular vein of each wild dog. By analysing these blood samples, it was found that none of the wild dogs had any vaccinations against disease-inflicting pathogens. The authors collected blood samples from 184 domesticated dogs whose owners reported that their dogs did not have any vaccinations against pathogens. Once these blood samples had been taken, wild dogs and domestic dogs were placed in close contact with each other in either the community lands or the commercial lands. The authors of this paper found that their results were consistent with the hypothesis that was initially developed at the beginning of the paper. This is that domestic dogs transmit canine pathogens to wild dogs. Increased contact with domestic dogs ensured that wild dogs had a greater chance of exposure to canine parvovirus and rabies virus. However, it was also found that there were no links between domestic dog contact risk and wild dog exposure in relation to canine distemper virus and canine coronavirus. This table here shows the percentages of these exposures. The authors' findings assisted in the identification of the most efficient and appropriate pathogen control methods. It was determined that by vaccinating either domestic dogs or wild dogs, this species will be protected from these disease-causing pathogens. By ensuring that such measures are put into action, this endangered species can be further protected from unnecessary exposure to disease-causing pathogens.